Schorghofer is a research faculty with the Institute for Astronomy over at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. He's a physicist by training, got his doctorate at the University of Chicago, and does a lot of really interesting work. He's actually came to be working with the Office of Mauna Kea Management, looking at permafrost up on Mauna Kea. That's how his background is physics. He works with the Institute for Astronomy and their astrobiology, for looking at similar cold environments on other planets and signs of life. But there's, of course, lots of corollaries right here on Earth that are worth looking at too, including snow on the summit of Mauna Kea. He also does some ice cave work here in Hawaii. We'll briefly touch on that. For those of you who are here, I guess it was last month now, Dr. Kenji Yoshikawa gave a talk, I think it was October, on permafrost. He was working on the same project as Norbert. Dr. Yoshikawa just happened to be passing through town doing a brief bit of field work, and it was an opportunity. But part of the interest for having Norbert give a talk tonight is he and Maunakea Novelmeyer and a graduate student whose name I do not remember about that piece of paper from the University of Minnesota. Have a paper coming out in the 2014 edition of the Hawaiian Journal of History on this very subject. The title is on the last slide of Norbert's talk. I don't remember it verbatim, but it's about the history of snow on the summit of Mauna Kea. Something to that effect. There's drinks in the back. I want to also thank John Coney in the back right there, standing up for logistical support and help getting this word out.
Mentioned, I'm really a physicist slash planetary scientist, and as such I'm barely qualified to talk about climate history, terrestrial climate history, but I'll explain to you soon why I'm studying snow on Mauna Kea and why I'm studying climate change in this particular region. And what you see up here is a painting, a nice painting by James Sawkins, from 1851-52, I think the observations of a draft was made in 51, and in 52 he completed it. And you see, this is from Hilo Bay, I think, and you see Mauna Kea and Manoa, both with snow on it. But of course, that's just a snapshot, and it doesn't tell us at all whether snow was very common at the time or whether this is exceptional. But certainly, snow on a tropical island looks very exciting. So the first question is why? Why study snow on Mauna Kea is sort of an odd subject. And of course there's no instrumental records until recently, of past climate on the summit especially. There were no measurements of temperatures at a time 100 years ago, even certainly not 200 years ago. Or of snow cover, certainly, or snow for anything. So, what do you go by? How do you reconstruct the climate of the past? And so the historical account, and snow is something you can see easily, right? People in a newspaper can write about, oh yes, we saw snow, we didn't see snow. So historical accounts is sort of one of the very few ways to find out what happened. And the only other alternative I've ever heard of in terms of reconstructing Hawaiian past climate, especially at high elevations, is tree rings, and that has not been done yet. So some trees in Hawaii actually have rings. I'm told, and I think there's currently a research group at UH which actually has began to study tree rings because rainfall still changes with seasons, and that's why some of them have rings. But these results are out yet. So really, the historical accounts are sort of the only in texts or even paintings, if one is really desperate, so to speak. One of the very few ways to do it. And so that's why I studied, not being a historian at all myself, that's why I got into reading about history and studying this with the help of others. because it seemed like the only way to do it. That's one of the reasons I did it. The other reason is just because there was a statement, it's a statement on the next slide, yes, there was a statement, it was in the news, happened to be in the news a couple of years ago, attributed by John Young, which said during the 26 years he has been here, he has never seen Mauna Kea, it's just an old spelling here, free from snow, and that was said in 1825. And that's sort of odd, so I looked at the statement, tracked down the source, and all of a sudden I became absorbed by it, and was buried in books, and I just had to find out what's really true, what sense it makes, and what one can really find out from a historiographer. So it was a project I never planned; it just happened to me, so to speak. And then, so there is something odd in that. So the last ice age, so Mauna Kea, Manoa too, of course, was glaciated during the last ice age, but that ended thousands of years ago. So about 10,000 years or so, the last ice sheet retreated, disappeared from Hawaii, and today we call it a snow line. So the elevation at which you have freezing temperature all year round, and snow or ice could survive all year round. And that's highest in summer, of course. So it's about 500 meters today in modern climate. It's about 500 meters above the summit. So still, how could you have snow all year round in around 1800 if today, just 200 years later, the snow line is so much higher? And then it's not just John Young, it's also like William Ellis was a missionary, and he wrote books about his travels in Hawaii. And he said, for example, that the high mountains of Hawaii, Mauna Kea specifically, is covered with perpetual snow, and which turns out to be wrong, but that's what he claims. And then there's other things like this. There's shrines, at least the hypothesis was put forward at some point. There's shrines at 30,000 feet elevation, and not many beyond. Why is that? And some idea was, well, maybe there was actually snow, and the ancient Hawaiians didn't go further than the snow line. So what's true and what's not true, and what can we really learn from this older text? So the first mention of snow is, with Captain Cook, of course, that he arrived on the island. So he came to a big island sort of last. So in December 1778 is the first sort of written sentence about snow on Hawaii. And he says, yes, he saw snow in the mountains. They were surprised because we're in the tropics, of course. And then others, this is not Captain Cook himself necessarily, but others who kept, several people who kept journals on the ship, from the ships. They said that, there's these high summits, and they are covered with eternal snow. But others, it depends who the officer is. Others, they're more careful in what they said. So this last statement here says, they're covered with snow, so particularly two, there was Mauna Kea and Manoa. All the time we were about the neighborhood. But they were actually only near the big island in winter of 78, 79, from December to March, with I think some interruption, and they left for early March. So they could not have possibly concluded that there's eternal snow, because we're only here for a few months, and we're here for a few winter months. So there's some exaggeration going on here. But definitely they did see snow, and they saw snow many times. So there are many reports. It took I don't know 6 or more years until the next ship came, but then they started to come regularly, and there are many reports of snow in Hawaii. And say, oh yeah, we passed Hawaii, we were in Hawaii, and we saw snow, but we don't know. It might have just been after snowstorms, so it doesn't say much about the duration. But there's also statements, and they're listed here, of specifically observation that there's no snow. There's no snow on Mauna Kea. So this is from Joseph Ingraham, who actually visited Hawaii, I think, 3 times, and his early journals actually were lost, unfortunately. And this is one of his later journals, and where he says, he came here the second time, and there was only a few small cascades, 2 small cascades of snow left. First visit, we saw more snow. So it's definitely no mantle of snow big continuous cover left. There's only a little bit of snow left. Then even Townsend from the Neptune, I think there was a merchant ship. We said, oh, we just don't know snow. In summer of 1798. Very clear, simple statement. We don't know how carefully we looked, but certainly from a distance we did not see snow. And then there is Adibert von Treviso, at least that's how I pronounce it, who was actually a big world traveler, has been to many, many places. On the road, they passed Hawaii. In fact, they're in such a hurry to Japan or wherever we went. They didn't even land in Hawaii, but they passed Hawaii twice. November 1860 and September 1870. And there's no snow. So I think these observations are at least 1, 2, 3 independent observations show it's definitely not true that Mauna Kea or Manoa was covered all year with snow at the time. It was only covered partly. So all the statements on whether it was perennial and so on, eternal snow, are just exaggerate. Now the same ship, the Ruri, had a painter on it, so Louis Choris, and he actually drew a drawing of the whole stretch of the island. So, and this is in French, I think this is Manoa. This, I've been told by somebody who speaks French, sounds like Montoualane. And so there's no snow on the island. And this is actually the first drawing, it was the first drawing we found of which includes Mauna Kea and Manoa. And there's no snow. So very illustrative proof that there was no eternal snow coming. But the years 1860s and 1870s are unfortunately totally atypical in climate history, right? About as atypical as you can get. Because the year before, 1850, was the greatest, or is one of the greatest volcanic eruptions in world history. Mount Tambora, Indonesia erupted. And the ash took a while, the ash spread over the whole globe. And the year after, 1860, is known, at least in Europe, or was known in Europe, as a year without summer, because there was still ash in the atmosphere. But that led, at least in Europe, to more precipitation and colder weather. So nobody knows how this exactly influenced Hawaii with the Tambora eruption. But probably one would expect more snowfall and colder temperatures. So it still holds up in some sense that this is evidence against an eternal snow cover. And here more drawings. These are the earliest. So this is one I just showed. Taiwan was a missionary in 1822. So another one done on here by William Ellis from 1823. Bingham, I believe, was a bishop, 1830. Lucas, this was a big expedition, U.S. expedition, 1840, 1841. And these, except for the first, snow. There's always snow on these, and later, the color shows up on the paintings. These are paintings all by James Sawkins from 1851. Snow. This is a picture I showed on a title page, and so on. So we all have snow on them, except for the earliest, for the 1815 picture. So we don't know whether it's possible that we just like to draw the snow because it's such an unusual occurrence. But certainly there was always snow, and but there was snow apparently. It was quite unusual. Let me just drink some water. So, but how long was there snow? What was the duration of the snow cover? And there are several observations here, which I cherry-picked here, about snow in summer, which happens today too, but it's fairly unusual. There can be snow in summer, although that might not have happened in a while. So here is William Ellis, a missionary who, along with his colleagues, traveled around the Big Island to find a station, a location for a mission station. And they were there for about 2 months, July, August 1833. And they said, these are covered by perpetual snow. So again, they say perpetual. But it was really just a timeline of 2 months. than the Blonde, which was a ship. And we also saw snow for about, well, every time we were here, I think it was also a better part of a month or so, in 1825. And then David Douglas. Now, David Douglas was a famous botanist. And he had visited Hawaii several times, including the winter of 1833, 1834. And he returned to Hawaii. And he was on Oahu probably. He returned in May or so of 1834 and actually died on the slopes of Mauna Kea doing research in some mysterious circumstances, which are the subject of debate. But anyway, so David Douglas actually, unlike the others, actually says, so again, he says, do not reach the limit of perpetual snow, but you find snow occasionally, even deep snow occasionally in summer. And then as James Saxon Charles, he was the publisher of the first English language newspaper called the Polynesian, which now has become the Honolulu magazine. But I think he went bankrupt very soon. But he was continued by others later on. So he visited Mauna Kea, he came to a big island, went up the summit, and went down the summit, left again. It took about 3 weeks. There was snow there all the time. There's many observations of snow. So that would not happen today, right? And you wouldn't see snow for several weeks when you visit. During the random time period. So visit for 3 weeks, you're not going to see snow nowadays. So this is definitely more snow than we have now. Not a perpetual cover at all, but a month or two was very usual at what is this, the first half of the 19th century. But particularly valuable are long-term residents, people who have actually been here a long time and left us some notes or some documentation about what they saw. And there's of course John Young, famous John Young, who came in 1790. And well, he probably didn't care much about the topic, but some visitor, John McCrae, talked to him at some point. And John McCrae actually wrote down James McCrae wrote down what John Young said. And John Young said, I showed a sentence earlier, there was never snow. He has never seen Mauna Kea free of snow. But that, of course, doesn't mean a metal of snow. It could just be a spot or two. And in this sense, there's some coherence because it's a small spot. But everybody who passed the island might have seen it. So if somebody, passes and lands on the island, just look carefully, or maybe the spots were on the other side of the mountain. So this is, as long as he means there's just a few spots, this is actually consistent with what everybody else said, or what other people said. The missionaries, which started to arrive in 1820, and they write letters. You don't know who the individual authors are. It's just a letter from missionaries in Hawaii, right? Whoever. So we don't know what the source exactly was, is not clear. But there's certainly missionaries on the Big Island too. And there's in the mountains, the high mountains, generally covered with snow. That's a long duration of snow for snow cover. And Kuan was a missionary in Europe for almost half a century. And the year after, I said usually metal is snow. Eventually, this he wrote an autobiography in the last year of his life. He says often crowned with snow. So today one wouldn't say that about Mauna Kea or Manoa. So definitely there was a much longer period of snow cover. Now I talked about English, and I think you also looked at a bit of French and German and whatever you're able to read. But another source, of course, one has to look at are the Hawaiian language sources. And it's actually amazing what databases there are these days. So there's a collection of Hawaiian language newspapers, which, so Hawaiian language kicked in a bit later because first the alphabet had to be developed, and then they started publishing newspaper and so on. So there's actually a very big database on digitally scanned newspaper, many of which are even translated into English and searchable. So what a wonderful database, and even more, they came up with And that must have been a lot of work. And they came up with a database of natural phenomena mentioned in this Hawaiian language newspaper. So you can say, who mentioned storm, who mentioned wave, and so on. And also the term snow. So you can actually you type in snow and actually find references to all these newspaper articles which mention snow. And poor Pierre Novelmeyer, who is a Hawaiian language professor at UH Manoa, then translated these, looked at the whole paragraph. And so we found various Hawaiian language sources too, but generally from a later period. And I just show one statement here, which I found particularly interesting. So this was written in 1867, November of 1867, and I don't unfortunately speak Hawaiian, so but here's the translation. So the gray heads of Hawaii Islands, with gray heads, what they mean is Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, and Mount Tuarara, because we're actually a snow-covered location here. We're a snow-covered location. This is a time when those old men are not gray-headed. Surprisingly for Mauna Kea, there is no sign of a cat, and Mauna Loa is completely open to view, deprived of the white head. So they were surprised that in November of 1867, where's the snow? Why do we have no snow this year? So apparently it was very common to have snow on all three of these mountains by November. Also, I showed one example, right? November of 1860, there was no snow, but from the drawing I showed. But there's a long time before. So, this is an indication that the snow started to retreat. Now, of course, that time period coincides with the end of the Ice Age. So the Ice Age, I think, let's see, I have a plot here. Yeah, it's a very, very scientific plot here. So the Little Ice Age has nothing to do with the regular Ice Age. The Little Ice Age is a much more recent period, which ended about in 1850. And these are various temperature reconstructions from the literature. So this is an medieval one period, and this is the Little Ice Age. The temperatures were just a tad lower, at least, in North America and Europe and so on. So 1850 is about here. So 1850 really is this increase of temperature sets in. And by now we're probably up here, 2014, up here somewhere else, rising like crazy. So there was this colder period. So it makes perfect sense that the duration of, but this also affected Hawaii. Although we don't know this, there is no other, paleoclimate record at this resolution. We don't know this independently. But it makes perfect sense that even Hawaii was affected by the Little Ice Age. And around 1850, you can't put an exact boundary on this, but around 1850, the climate started to become warmer. So this is an overview in form, which maybe might be a little bit too small for everyone to read, of just some of the observations, but sort of the key observations. And so English Captain Cook's ships really provide the first records of snow, and then John Young, arrives and talks about having seen Mauna Kea free of snow here in 1825. This is a pretty long period. And then you have various observations of not having snow, at least three. And William Ellis saw snow in summer. The Missionary says generally covered with snow. Titus Cowan says usually mantled with snow. Then we have, let's see, what else is, well, it's not here, I guess, James Jackson Charles, James Jackson Charles, snow during, his whole visit in summer, and so on. And one can go on and on, but eventually, the literature just doesn't explode, and it takes an increasing amount of effort to study it systematically. So this is about the first century of written records. And I think there is evidence of prolonged snow cover, at least until 1840 or 1860 in this region. Somehow seems to be a gap in records. Much longer snow cover in winter as in summer, but definitely not all year round. And then there is observations of there being much less snow, more consistent with the modern climate. But let me mention two small tidbits of text from a later period. So this was written in 1868. So William Brigham was, you may know, because he was the first director of the Bishop Museum. He did a lot of research about Hawaii, published books and so on. And the first time he came to Hawaii was actually in 1864, 65, to go to Forest Mountain with various field studies, including a botanical study on Mauna Loa in 1864. And they're both Harvard graduates, I think. And Horace Mann, I think, died a year or two later of tuberculosis at the age of 24 or so. And William Brigham got himself into trouble on the East Coast and moved to Hawaii and stayed in Hawaii. And at first as a curator of the Bishop of Seaman and his director. So all kinds of interesting characters. But Brigham made a lot of relevant observations. And Horace Mann has an unpublished manuscript, which is in the archives of the Bishop Museum. I found them there, and it's really the only text which really clearly states that in 1864 they did not see any snow on Mauna Loa during their field study. Nice manuscript. But what he also says here, yeah, so he says, oh, this eternal snow, this is not true, it's all nonsense. And he also says, well, there's ice caves on Mauna Loa. It's quite common with ice caves on Mauna Loa. And today, ice caves are extremely rare on Mauna Loa. So there seems that the systematic change too. And he also mentions, much later, in a book, I think published in 1909, that the cinder cones of Mauna Kea, so there's a whole, there's many craters on Mauna Kea, that the cinder cones actually covered with snow all year round. So inside the craters, you find snow. And that's also definitely not true in today's climate. Now, I'm jumping forward almost a century here to another very interesting character, interesting scientist, Alfred Woodcock, who never earned a PhD, but eventually I gave him an honorary PhD because of all the great papers that he wrote and discoveries he made. And he really worked on topics nobody else would have otherwise run across. He made 350 field trips to Mauna Kea to study Lake Waiau and study other parts. And he wrote papers about it. Very interesting work. And one of the things he discovered is permafrost. The permafrost means you're below freezing for at least 2 years, because 1 year would be odd, but 2 years is not as odd, right? So, and that's not right on the summit, but it's inside two craters, inside two of the cinder cones. And one of them, actually, if you go to the summit, you can actually see into the cinder cones. You're not allowed to walk into it, but you can see into the cinder cone. But it was always buried by about 40 centimeters, so you can't see it on the surface anyway. He found it, I think, initially from a seismological survey done in connection with building early telescopes. So he found it and he studied it for several years. And let's see, so this is actually, right. So this is the crater. The summit is up here. The road. This is probably a picture from the road, actually, panorama from the road. And the permafrost patch was about back there. It was 10 meters deep, a few tens of meters long, and a few tens of meters wide. And it was on a north-facing slope, and also partially on the floor. North-facing, you're still at 20 tropics, but still 20 north, so it still makes a difference whether it's north-facing or south-facing. So this definitely gets less sunlight, right, because you have this high crater rings. And so it's colder than the sun is. And this is actually a picture of a permafrost, but it's hard to see anything. It's black and white, but there was this solid mass filling all the pore spaces of ice, which did change appearance over 3 or 4 years. He studied it. And he found two craters, and you don't know whether he just didn't look at other craters or whether he looked and it wasn't there. But he documented it at 2 places, essentially. So why is there permafrost? Well, part of the reason is certainly just sunlight, illumination. So this is a model calculation, actually, and the contours are just topography. The summit is here. This is the crater Q. And this is a north-facing slope, so you see it's extra cold, so the color is how much sunlight it gets during the year. And so it's extra cold, but there's colder places, like the north-facing slope of Maunakea, this crater, or the outer slopes of this cinder cones. And this, I think, is actually eroded on. You can actually drive by it. But nobody ever reported permafrost from here or there, but from here and there. And why is there? So, but these areas also don't get much sunlight. They're just steep north-facing slopes. But there's no permafrost there. There must be an additional reason, not just how high the horizon is and the incidence angle. There must be additional reasons why the interior of these craters are so cold. Or were so cold. Well, they're still very cold. And this is the only, I guess, diagram I'm going to show, but I thought it shows something very nicely. So here on the horizontal, there is a temperature, the air temperature. This horizontal is the air temperature on the floor of the crater. And on the vertical is the air temperature of one of the telescopes which is close to the rim of the crater. So this is sort of a comparison of the temperature rim of the crater versus the floor of the crater. And if it's along to this line, if it's colder at the floor, it's colder on the rim. It's this line. But there are these points to the left here where the floor of the crater is a lot colder than the crater rim. And it goes down to minus 19 Celsius, minus 20 Celsius, coldest temperature you've ever heard of in Hawaii. But on the crater rim, it only goes down to like minus 7 or 8 Celsius. So it does get much colder on the floor sometimes. And there's one specific condition when it happens, there's no wind. So the blue is very little wind, and the black is, everything else, we have a little bit of wind, the black dots and the blue dots. So when there's no wind, the floor of the crater is much colder than the rim. And that makes perfect sense, because you get cold air pools. So the air in the crater just cools down at night, and outside the crater it's not. And that's why, so it's called a cold air pool. It's now known in the micrometeorology literature. In fact, some of the coldest places in the United States are cold air pools. Peter 6 in Utah. Some of the record lowest temperature in the United States. And that's just a valley, and it's extremely cold on the floor because of the cold air. So this is an additional factor, cold air pools, that make these spots so extra cold. And in fact, a few months ago, I went up there with an infrared camera, and so this is basically an image of surface temperature. And I'm pointing to this infrared camera image covers about that area, and actually you see here this extra cold area. So this is just before sunrise, 6 a.m. And this is actually the expression of the cold air pool. So it's extra cold and a slightly tilted pool here. And if you walk down with measuring a temperature, you actually see a chunk. It suddenly gets colder when you reach the surface of this cold air pool. So it's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's really so that's also what's happening. And without that, there would be no permafrost. That extra cooling effect from the air sitting in there allows the permafrost to begin. Now that permafrost is there in the early 70s. Now that's already 40 years ago. That's a while ago. So what has happened to it since? And this is work done by a geography professor in Tom Gianluca, who just compiled all the temperature data from high elevation stations. So there's none of Mauna Kea over such a long time period. So this starts in 1950s. But there's one in Mauna Loa Observatory and so on. I think it's based on the highest 4 stations you could find. And then you just fill a line and try to find a trend here. And since the 1970s, you have about 1 degree Celsius warming, climate warming. So this is just a global climate warming signal, which at high elevation is a bit stronger than at low elevation. So you have actually 1 degree Celsius warming. And the temperature which Arthur Woodcock had measured, and he did this for several years, wonderful measurements, is just a few tenths of a degree below freezing. So already, he measured it was very close to melting. And so if you say, well, now it's 1 degree Celsius warmer, well, it should have, not necessarily disappeared, but it should have started melting. It's not the only factor, of course, which sets the temperature up there. So one is increase in air temperature. The other one is a snow cover. So that's why I put up this statement by Brickham. But there used to be snow in the cinder cones all year, and now there's not. So the significance of that is snow is white, it reflects light, so more light. So snow actually makes the surface be colder. So if you have less of a snow cover, less frequent snow cover, it will be warmer. So there has probably been a trend to less and less snow since there's permafrost form, and that's also bad for the permafrost. And then because of the cold air pools, you know, it matters how many windless nights you have. And there, I don't know what the trend is, whether we get more or fewer windless nights now. So this I don't know yet what direction even the effect has, but both of these effects certainly lead to warming and melting. However, just because it gets warmer, it doesn't mean that permafrost immediately disappears. Because you need a lot of energy to melt ice, a lot of energy actually. So even if it's a bit warmer, you know, the heat just slowly starts to go in, and you can estimate, you know, how long it will take with just a degree of warming and a little bit of difference in snow cover. And it would probably be a century or more. But, and this is for those who have been to a talk by Kenji Yoshikawa, who really did a geophysical survey, you know, just trying to find out if permafrost is still there from the surface, it seems to have disappeared. It seems to have disappeared. So how could it have disappeared so fast? How could it have disappeared in just 40 years? And I suspect the main factor is rainwater, because it rains, and the rain doesn't have 0 Celsius, it rains warmer. And that can potentially bring a lot of heat to the permafrost. So warm rainwater has the potential of melting the permafrost fast. And it looks like it actually has completely disappeared. That's not a definite answer, but that's what it looks like. So, well, it's bad. So, right, so all the permafrost may have disappeared from Hawaii. You know, I mean, it's only been known in 2 spots. And they're still looking whether they can find it somewhere else. So there may or may not be any permafrost left on Mauna Kea. This is just the temperature. So, you know, Woodcock measured the temperature, and above the permafrost, he found it to be minus 0.3 Celsius. And in areas which are also roughly the same area, we now found it to be several degrees Celsius warmer than what we. Now, this is just 1 year, so we have to wait longer for this number to get better. But you know, we are not measuring any sub-freezing annual mean temperatures anymore. And Haukea, which is the next silicon over, which Woodcock also said had permafrost in it, also seems to be too warm. So we haven't found a spot yet which would still be, freezing. However, there seems to be one very odd occurrence, that there are spots which are below freezing in Manoa. And this is the same table again. The first 5 rows are the same, but I added here 2 more rows from 2 caves on Manoa. There's lots of caves on Manoa. These are special caves that have ice in them, and the same. You know, well, let me explain sort of why this is. But the temperature in one of these annual mean temperatures, actually only one of these ice caves, is actually below freezing. 0.7 Celsius. So that's with one place in Hawaii. I'm sure there's more, but in terms of what we actually measured and know, there's only one place in Hawaii which is still below freezing on annual mean, and it's Arsia Cave. A cave discovered in 2009. It has ice in it, and what happens is this cave slows downhill, and the cold air sinks in, and the warm air doesn't sink in. So that makes them extra cold. The sinking cold air, similar to the cold air pools, but you know, even deeper, even stronger. These caves are extra cold. So there's still some old ice in Hawaii, so to speak. Now, I also promised to talk about how this is an analog to Mars, but Fritz is standing here, and how much time do I have left?
Oh, you're fine.
I'm fine. Okay. I'll talk a bit about Mars. So, part of what I said, at least the part concerning microclimate, is a great analog to Mars. So, Hawaii has since long been considered a wonderful analog to our sister planet, or brother planet, whatever you want to call it, Mars. So Mars is further away from the Sun and Earth, so it's colder, but it has many similarities, and it's almost completely made up of volcanoes. So Mars does not have plate tectonics, so it doesn't recycle its crust. So all you see, almost all you see, there's a bit of weathering, but almost all you see is igneous rock. You see basalt, and you have sheer volcanoes. Lower, the Permafrost, Mauna Kea, are great examples of sheer volcanoes, and you have sheer volcanoes on Mars too. This very low viscosity lava which makes this flat slopes. And so the basic reason why scientists for a long time, scientists for decades now, have considered Hawaii such a great analog for Mars is just that it's volcanic rock, it's basalt, it's made of the same thing. You have lava tubes on both places, you have craters at both, volcanic craters on both places, and so on. Now, Mars actually has a lot of water ice. Particularly, has two polar caps like Earth. There's two polar caps made out of several kilometers of water ice. And not only that, there's many more water ice reservoirs. And here is just one particularly pretty one. This is a little glacier inside a crater, and there's some frost on the side. But this is a water ice glacier in the polar regions, which just sits around. It's basically not only is it cold enough, it's that this cold temperatures the atmosphere is saturated with water, so it doesn't evaporate, doesn't disappear because the atmosphere essentially is very humid. So you find all these water ice deposits, but only in the polar regions where it's cold enough for the atmosphere to be. So there's as much water vapor at the equator as there are at the poles, but only at the cold polar temperature does it saturate the atmosphere. The equator does not. And so it's very rare and not to be expected to find any water ice in the tropical regions of Mars. But there is. There are some exceptions in the small places. So this is this is the work of a planetary science group on the East Coast. But this is a crater at latitude 10 south, so in the tropics, Martian tropics. And this is probably hard to see from a distance, but there's ridges which delineate, which look like that beneath the surface you have a glacier, you have an ice sheet, and it retreats stepwise. So you see the collapse, and then it sits there for a while, and then you have a ridge, and it retreats further. So they argue this must be a subsurface glacier, and it sits right in the tropics. So this here, for example, is a direct analog to Pureki, to the crater on the summit of Mauna Kea and other craters. The microclimate inside the crater will be very important. So again, you have some additional shadowing for the rings, and you might, this is also a subject of ongoing research, you might have cold air pools inside these tropical Martian craters, just as you have cold air pools inside terrestrial craters, or if it's a different type of atmosphere. And then, of course, you have there's many odd features on Mars. This is a nice high-resolution image, so this is just 100 meters, and this is maybe 50 meter wide. Some craters, there's a zillion craters on Mars. But what you see here from the shadow is, so the shape of this shadow is the same as the shape of this ring. So the sun is still fairly high. But this is a deep hole, right? So this is about as deep as it's wide. So how can that be? Well, there's a lava tube beneath, and it's collapsed. So this is a skylight of a cave on Mars, and there's actually many lava tubes on Mars. So the caves on Mauna Loa are also a nice analog to Mars. And you find all these wonderful caves on Mars as well. So, conclusions. I'm sure okay, I should finish. So, in terms of a historical study, so historical study I use as a means of sort of almost the only means of trying to understand how the climate changed on Mauna Kea, and snow cover is one thing one can see, and so documented it. And so it's not true, as some have said, in the news and in the journals, that there was snow on Mauna Kea all the way around. Definitely not true. But it is true that there was snow cover for much longer in warmer climate, in winter as well as in summer. Months in summer was apparently not unusual. And then in a more general context, well, this is snow. Later, the Permafrost was discovered, which may have disappeared, in which case, we don't know yet, but there was Permafrost on Mauna Kea, which, by the way, is not so clear where it came from, but we probably had snow, it melted, but there was still snow cover in the crater, and some of this ice survived. And now the snow is much less frequent than the ice. It started to disappear. And I think all this is there's lots of opportunities to do analog studies with Mars, where you have similar processes happening. But in terms of Earth, I think an interesting scientific challenge is to find the last ice. So Mauna Kea, the last permafrost, is about to disappear, if it hasn't already disappeared. There is still some old ice on caves on Manoa, which we also have just started to study. But all of this, I think, will eventually disappear. It's just a matter of time. And this is our last opportunity to study. And finally, so as Fritz Kass has already mentioned, so the historical studies are about to come out in a paper which with Eliana Kantar and Turkey and Lokomayer any day now, and this paper will be online publicly. Unlike many journals, this journal you don't need a subscription, so this will be readily available. And I'll also thank my many colleagues for collaborations in various research projects, and the Office of Mauna Kea Management and Space Plan and the Astronomy Institute and various institutions which have supported this research. Thank you.
You talked about the presence of snow on Mauna Kea. Was there any reference to elevation of the snow within that time period? I'm curious how far down the snow would have come.
Yes, so there is occasionally mention how low it is down, and there is statements, they say it was down to the base, which I would understand, there are several rotors and so on. But the depth really depends how big of a storm you get, right? So it's a different kind of climate, because if you're hit by a really strong storm, it went to low elevation. So I haven't actually systematically looked for such statements. But yeah, but it varies. It varies. But like in Waimea, for example, there's reports of frost in Waimea, which is pretty low elevation. So there's some information, but it's mostly a measure of how strong your storms are. I think more than what's the annual mean temperature.
I wonder if you've talked to any of the people who are involved in the paving, construction of the paving of the Summit Road near the summit. I think that was about 1990. I happened to be observing at Euclid in the mornings that day, and we always had to stop because there's so much shaking to do with that.
Oh.
And I remember distinctly driving down, seeing trucks carrying what looked to me like chunks of cinder that looked to me like they were frozen together. Now, this was not in a cinder cone. It was on kind of the side of it. It's what people call a foible, but pretty high up. So I thought that was permafrost. But of course, I never asked anybody. But could that have been permafrost? It was September, so it was the end of summer.
Interesting. So I asked one person, Anne Bosgaard's husband. Somebody must. Okay. And he said yes, they found ice many times, but it was just a snapshot, right? So they find ice once. We don't know whether it was around all year.
This item was a big chunk of cinder.
Yeah. So end of summer is a good starting point. I mean, there's often a delay within the temperature of the surface and the subsurface. So end of summer is not necessarily as good as the time you might see. So I have done it partially, and there are people say yes, they have seen ice. It's just hard to say that it's permafrost or not. But I'm very curious if there is more, especially statements which associate with a particular location. One could go back now and look whether there's permafrost or not. So I'm very interested if there's specific information like that. Okay. But there was a question from spectators.
How are you going to find the permafrost areas if they still exist?
Yes, so the best way to find it is you dig, but we don't want us to do that, right? So the way we do it is so there's geophysical methods, and the very basic involve you use an electric current to map out the resistivity in the surface. or you use radio waves to map out the resistivity of the surface. So we are in the process of doing that. So there is methods. So they're not 100% compelling, but they are. Well, these methods are conventionally used to map out the permafrost. So there's ways to do it from the surface. So I got a resistivity of directly constant. So some progress.
I just kind of asked, I spent quite a bit of time in the scared and infrared cameras that flew on the north side of the Polygon. One of the things in the winter that is so counterintuitive is how on cold nights at midnight, it was really clear rainless night. The snow is always quite a bit warmer than the cinder, which is radiatively couples much easier, and the snow doesn't couple to the sky, and it's sky near 0 Kelvin.
And you said at night specifically?
Yes,
Okay.
like typically around midnight, say 4 hours after sunset, 5-6 hours after sunset. When you look out, it's like backwards. Everything seems wrong, right? Because in the daytime, the snow is colder than the surrounding cinder, but at night, it's the exact reverse. Snow is warmer than the surrounding cinder.
So fresh snow has extremely low thermal conductivity. Now, once it has, compactified, sort of, more icy, it's the other way around. It has very high thermal conductivity. And the thermal conductivity sets the night-day difference. So from what you described, actually, it would be typical for something with very high thermal conductivity, which means it cools down slower at night and heats up slower at day.
I think this is radiant.
Right, so the surface by affects the surface temperature. And snow also, I think, is very low thermal and it's
Very poor again, whereas the cinder is really good.
Well, I'm curious why you looked with infrared up there, so if you have time, I'm curious to chat about
It's intrusive, we observe remotely, right? So we won't be able to see those people.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so this slope of extremely. It's very little sunlight, actually. So I wouldn't actually be surprised if there is no possibility that they look carefully. So if you've seen some temperature anomalies, I'm very interested in.
At one point, you said that, or someone told me that Lake Wyal was fed by Permafrost, but from what you're saying, that doesn't seem likely.
Yes. So the mystery is why is Lake Wyal, Pool Wyal impermeable, right? And one reason which has initially just been put forward as a hypothesis is to say, well, maybe there's permafrost beneath, and that's why it's impermeable. And obviously it becomes an opposite. There's always been a hypothesis, but then there was some work using isotopes of water, and it's been claimed that it's dry. The isotopes and further down from spring water further down follows sort of a lake, and sort of gave additional emphasis to the theory that the permafrost was melting and the lake started leaking. So the temperature measurements at Lake Wyal are way too warm. So like plus 6 Celsius or something. So it is way too warm for permafrost. So I think it's not underlain by permafrost. But has been suggested twice at least. Yeah. And it's still not crystal clear why it's improbable.
So just thinking about the craters on Mauna Kea, I was just wondering if they would be comparable enough to the craters on Mercury that you could, think about the water that we're finding in the craters of Mercury, use it as an analog for Mercury as well?
Yes, so, right, so there is water ice in craters on Mercury, and there is water ice in craters on the Moon, in the polar region. But it's less analogous to Mars, because, so these two bodies don't have atmospheres, and the way the water got there is very different. It got there by ballistic hops of water molecules, as you have so we have a gravitationally big and strong, the gravity is strong enough, water molecules actually stay with the body, and they just hop. There's water molecules hop a few hundred kilometers, and some fall into cold traps. And so they accumulate in very different ways, and they accumulate cold already, so to speak. So then they fall into these permanently shallow craters, which are extremely cold and with ice stays around them forever. So just the way the ice gets there is very different. And there's a lack of the atmosphere. So there are an analog, but not as good as the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just wondering, so there are archaeological evidence, right, that Hawaiians quit mining the stones up there in the 1200s. But I guess unfortunately, it corresponds to just about the time of the arrival of the wheat and also. And so I was just wondering, did you look into the genealogical, historical accounts of the last time they were mining stone for Mauna Kea, and if that might coincide with the rest?
Could you repeat the question?
Well, okay, the question was, if I paraphrase it, whether the end of the mining of the Atsikari, might have coincided with the end of the beginning, with the end of the light. I have not studied that. Now, from what I know, which may be incomplete, is the type of rock found there is better than what's found higher. So it probably is just the best source. Now, one might wonder whether the snow gets so low that it would not be accessible, which is what you're saying. So, no, I have not studied. I mean, the Middle Ice Age started around, 1500, 50 or something. So, interesting. Okay,